Hey, so if you've ever worked with large files in Figma, then you're all too familiar with this Figma rainbow loader. Well, have you ever thought, I wonder how to recreate this in Figma? Well, today I'm going to teach you how to do just that. And we're going to do a little bit of an improvement or a variation on it where it's a spinning rainbow loader like this. So yeah, let's go check out the tutorial. Okay, so let's get started. My name is Muda, and I'm going to teach you how to make this rainbow loader in Figma. Now, there are three elements to this rainbow loader. The first being the rainbow gradient, the second being the mask, and then the third is probably the most complicated element of it all, and that's animating it. Now, for the rainbow, we just need to figure out a way to recreate Roy G. Biv BW, because there's a black and white to it. Now there are two main ways we can do this. The first one is by creating a gradient and then adding the different colors to that gradient. We're not going to use this method. We're actually going to use the second method, which is a bit more complicated, but we need to practice this method in order to do the circular rainbow gradient. And that's by using a plugin called BlendingMe, which is super underrated. I really highly recommend it. Now, the second part is to use a mask. What? No, not this type of mask. A Figma mask. Now, basically you contain the rainbow within this mask, and I'll show you how to use that. And then the third, most complicated part, we are going to use smart-animate to make our prototype animate. Now, if you want a quick explanation on how this works, you can check out my other video, which is the smart-animate video. But today we're just gonna use it and utilize it to make this animation happen. So let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna start by creating this gradient. I start by creating a few blocks which we will use with the BlendingMe plugin and blend between these multiple shapes. So first we're creating the Roy G. Biv. I'm setting a new color for each rectangle. Now these colors I've taken from my own personal color library. You don't have to use a color library, you can just make sure you hit red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and then black and white. Now I've duplicated this, but I've done so a bit prematurely. We'll duplicate it after using the BlendingMe plugin so that we don't have to blend the second half of this rainbow loader. You'll see in a minute. So the BlendingMe plugin by default sets the number of blends to 20. You can just use this or you can adjust it to whatever number you like, but I find 20 works perfectly fine for this situation. Now after we've set the blends, we want to make the gradient more natural, and so I've set a layer blur to each shape. Now this is the masking part. We've created a rectangle and we're setting the corner radius to infinite, so it's more circular, and setting the height to 16. What we're gonna do next is move this mask below the gradient and then selecting everything before clicking the moon-shaped circle at the top. That moon-shaped circle is basically how you turn a shape into a mask. And if you want to turn a shape into a mask, the masking shape has to be under everything else. So in our example, we've put the mask under the gradient. Now what I'm trying to do here is resize the gradient on the inside of the mask. But what I've made a mistake in is that when I resized, I also had the mask shape selected, and I just unselected it there so I could make the rainbow a bit longer without adjusting the mask shape. Now what I'm gonna do next is create that white loading portion of the animation. But before we do that, I'm renaming all my layers so that it's easier to work with. Now, what I've done here is I've recreated a rectangle shape within the loader. You can just create a rectangle within the mask. You don't have to duplicate the existing rectangle that's there. In hindsight, it would have been better actually to just make a new rectangle. So here we have our rectangle and we have our background gradient as well. What I did just now was to move the gradient so it's aligned right. That way it has room to move when we start the animation. And here we're starting to build the animation. Now what I'm doing now is moving the gradient to the right a bit so that there's a difference between the first frame, which is the one that we made initially, and the second frame, which is the second one we've made. I'm also moving the white part of the loader to the right as well so that it looks like it's moving forward. Now here I'm experimenting a bit with how far I want the loader to move. You can also use your own experimentation as well. What you need to make sure of though is that from the original frame, the intermediary frame, and then your final frame, your loader or your gradient keeps moving to the right. And just as a reminder, I'm making this file available on Figma community, so make sure you follow me on Figma community. Just search Izzy, @Izzy. Or you can check the description below. Now we've moved into the animation phase. What we're doing now is setting an after delay transition between all the frames. And we're setting that delay to 1. What this does is that it'll kickstart a transition to the next frame automatically as soon as 1 millisecond it transpires. We're setting the animation type to smart-animate, and that's what allows the elements on the screen to move and match up with the next element on the next screen. And as you can see, our loader looks great. It looks just like the Figma one. Now, what I'm gonna attempt to do now is just clean it up a bit, add some more interesting visual details, but essentially the loader is perfectly ready to go. What I'm trying to do is create a inner line on this mask. I'm doing that by duplicating the rectangle and then removing the fill and adding a stroke. Now what I did just there is I changed it from after delay to on tap so that it would be visible and it would be easy for us to see the progress that I'm making in the prototype on the right side of the screen. We're setting the background color to be a bit darker so it separates from the white. And I'm just playing around with the inner stroke to see what will work best. And as we can see, the loader still works perfectly. Now I've added my logo in just to add a little bit of extra oomph to the loader. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the exciting part, which is the circular loader. Now, in this part of the tutorial, I'm just gonna show you how to recreate this gradient or the circular gradient and how to do a basic circular loading animation. If you wanna see how we add the progress bar, that's gonna be another video, but let's just stick to me explaining this to you first. So the way this is built is the same way using BlendingMe. We've broken away the mask or removed the mask so I can show you the actual gradient that's involved. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove all of the additional BlendingMe rectangle layers by just deleting them. So you can see the base shapes that I worked with to begin with. And now we're doing the same process that we did for the regular Figma loader, which is selecting 2 of the rectangles and adding that 20 blending, or that 20 blends between each rectangle. Now we'll just speed up the process. Now something interesting happens here. Have a look. You see our rectangles are actually rotated, or for some reason they aren't aligning properly. This will happen from time to time with BlendingMe. You can solve this in this case by just rotating one of the rectangles that we've used to blend. Now again, we have the same issue. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to rotate one of the rectangles that we've used to blend, and then run the BlendingMe plugin again. And there you go. Our gradient fixes itself just by rotating the blending rectangle. Now this is the same issue and we fixed it really easily. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add that layer blur to our gradient so it has a bit more of a natural look to it. And we're going to go back to step 2, which is adding the mask. So we've created this circle with a fill. We're going to remove the fill and then add a stroke, or add a stroke and remove the fill actually. Once we've removed the fill, we're going to send this shape to the back, and then we're going to select everything. And we're going to turn this into a mask by pressing the moon shape circle at the top. And there you go. You have your gradient circle. Now we're going to duplicate the frames to start animating it. What I do here is that I rotate it by 179, and then I set the rotation again to be the flip side of 179, which is negative 179. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the frames together so that they can animate together. We're going to use the same method. We're going to apply a smart-animate animation style, and we're going to set a transition of after delay and 1 millisecond. For the second to third frame, we actually have to set an animation type of instant. This will allow us to swap between the second frame and the third frame seemingly instantaneously without any noticeable lag between the 2 frames. Now we link the last frame back to the first frame so that it can rotate freely. And there we have it. Our loader is loading freely. Now, if you want to see how we add the progress part of this loader, tune in to the next video. I'm gonna leave this video here. I think this looks great already. I think it's an improvement to the existing straight line Figma loader, but let me know what you guys think. To each their own. Maybe you have a different opinion to me. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know. But that's the end of this tutorial. We're gonna stop this here at the circular loader. Hopefully you found this useful. If you're interested in seeing how the white part goes into the circular loader, I'll make a separate video for that. I realize it's a bit more complicated and I think it deserves its own explanation. So if you want to see more, if you found this useful, let me know. Drop a like, leave something in the comments. I'll be sure to read it. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I hope you learned something interesting. We're at 544 subscribers now, which is crazy. That's a lot of people trying to learn how to design, and I'm happy to be here to try to facilitate that. So hopefully you guys see me again next week. I know I said I'd be back in a few days. I'm still trying to balance work and making videos, so eventually we'll get the schedule right. But for now, I will do my best to see you in a few days, but definitely next week. So stick around, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.